The following interview is sponsored by Copper Giant. Always do your own due diligence before making any investment decision. Hello, everybody. Welcome into Commodity Culture. My name is Jesse Day. Today is August 24th, 2026, and my guest is the CEO of Copper Giant, a company focused on advancing its high-quality Mocoa copper project in Colombia. We're going to talk about the macro when it comes to the copper space. We're going to dive into the company. Ian Harris, great to have you back on the program.
It is so much nicer when you're not saying what's going to happen, but it actually happened since your last interview. So it's a good time. It's a good feeling.
Absolutely. And speaking of our last conversation, that was back in June. Since then, copper hitting a new all-time high once again at the start of this month. Looks like we're knocking on the door of $7 copper. So very exciting time. What are your thoughts on this recent price action and the trajectory of the copper market for the remainder of this year and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing this story for a long time, and now it's kind of playing out. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that copper is going to get over $7. It's only a question of when. I think it's going to get way higher than $7, right? But even I was surprised by the price action recently in copper. It's not because I don't believe it really needs to get a lot higher to incentivize new production, but how it's showing such strength. And it's not because I don't believe in copper. I just don't believe the traders have a long term vision, right? They have a tendency to look at short term fundamentals. But I guess the really low inventories. I mean, I remember, I think probably last time in June, I was probably answering, why is everybody talking about these gigantic inventories? And I said, they're only like 14 days, right? So even if they're historically high, but it's like the COVID toilet paper moment. Everybody's just hoarding and kaboom, just what, 3 months later, it's at down extremely low inventories. So there's obviously the concern of US tariffs. And so people are trying to, but it's one of those that hasn't played completely out because people don't know what's going to happen. What decision is the president going to make on how this? So it's kind of like only half in on the tariff side. You're seeing extremely low inventories in China. You're seeing now it's not just spot, but it's actually negative where smelters are paying mines. We have a lot paying mines to process their concentrate. We do see a lot of destructions. You see the El Nino effects in Chile, the et cetera, et cetera. But those are short term, so it shocks me that people are like, "No, it's all going to be okay," right? That people are actually acting like they're a little concerned. Now, in a broader perspective, I see lots of concern, especially from governments, right? From the U.S. government, from others. The types of conversations that we have shows that people are really concerned about securing long-term supply chains. Because early in the conversations, it was sort of like, yeah, we're going to need some more copper. We'll just pay more money for it, right? Well, okay, there'll be higher prices, and then they're like, wait a second, where does this all come from? We don't have the smelting capacity, and then China's not going to give it to us. Oh no. Well, even if we have the smelting capacity, there's no projects, right? And that learning process, I mean, we have to understand that the majority of governments and large companies, they don't understand this side of the business and they don't understand the conclusion that we've come to a long time ago. Problem in copper is not a production problem. It's a deposit problem, right? So while there's short and medium term little levers that you can pull, like people are already pulling all those kind of levers, right? They're tried stockpiling, they're doing all these other things to try to what is it called, brace for impact, right? But it's still happening, and there's no deposits, right? There haven't been any discoveries. The brownfields have been played out to stretch. You can't no puedes sacar sangre de remolacha. You cannot take blood out of a turnip, I think is the right kind of U.S. expression, right? They've done that for the last few decades. You can't do it anymore, right? So you need new projects, and then they're like, well, it takes 14 years just to go to permit one, right? And then to discover one to permit is 20 years. We have a big Houston, we have a big problem. So I'm just shocked that it's playing out this early, right? Normally people, they're the three monkeys. They want to hear no evil, see no evil, and they're just worried about the short term. But it's really playing out now, right? I There might have got over this market might think that copper's a little over the skis. There might be a slight correction, but these long term, the trajectory in copper is so bullish. And we just have to look back in history, right? When the last run, when China was doing all its development, copper, what I like about copper is it's just a juggernaut. It isn't these hot spikes. It 3 years in a row it increased 50% every single year. Just went along. And I think overall, it's like a 200% increase during that time period. So I wouldn't expect it to act similar, right? But that was just China. Today it's the world. The world is still electrifying. We still have a mountain of people moving from poverty into the middle class. We have an aging infrastructure in the United States. We have a whole move towards cleaner energies and electric vehicles that is a double whammy. Not only do you have to produce more energy, you also have to transmit more energy, and then you have to store it in something, right? And then on top of it is the data center race, right? It's a race. So there might be protest, and then what I kind of enjoy is, oh, look how much fun it is to permit that stuff, right? That people are realizing. And I think that's the reason why the United States is now talking. It's going to be really tough to do this in the United States, right? We've built up a quagmire of bureaucracy and also of NIMBYism that makes this development very difficult. So it's a complex problem, and I think friendshoring for the United States is obviously one of the obvious replies.
And just how constrained do you see the supply side being at present? You mentioned Chile having some weather issues. They've cut their 2026 output forecast down around 2.6% to approximately 5.27 million tons. Operational setbacks, declining grades, weather disruptions, all playing a role here. Would love to get your thoughts there. And when it comes to the discovery of new copper deposits, I mean, how many exploration teams are out there, boots on the ground, trying to find new copper deposits? And for those who are maybe unfamiliar, how long does that take once discovery occurs to then actually bring that into a fully producing mine?
I'm going to try to divide that into a couple sections, right? So the first is I look at the forecasters and they're still very short-term focused. And they're like, the problem in Chile is temporary. The problem in Zambia is temporary. The problem in Indonesia is temporary. The problem in the Congo is temporary, right? The problem in Panama might get all sorted out, right? So they still only looking just a little bit out, right? And so I'm a lot more conservative on the supply side because of simple math. You're at historical high prices in copper, and you still have not seen any sort of response on the supply side. It's been the opposite, right? We've had less supply since having historical copper prices. That might be an exaggeration, actually, but at least it's flat, right? Where it needed to grow, I think is probably the deficit has grown, right? During that same time period. You see Antamina going through $1 billion expansion to produce 70,000 more tons a year. 70,000 tons, right? It is nowhere close. And then if you look the other side, the big mining companies, which do not believe the myth that the mining industry is trying to figure out how to solve this problem, right? They're not incentivized to solve this problem. They're incentivized to maximize profit. And there's no better way than having really, really high copper prices, right? So they're not around trying to figure out how to solve the problem. They're trying to figure out what's the best way to take advantage of that problem with the minimum amount of risk. So, and then you look to solve this problem, you need like $250 billion of investment into the copper space. That's just the build, by the way, not the discovery side. And that money's not even available, right? So it's just daunting. That's one half the equation that I think will play out in the medium to long term. So the next question is, how many companies are out there actually actively searching and discovering? I think there's definitely more companies that are now focused on the exploration side, right? But it's still an extremely short list. I got a comparable to our company, Copper Giant, from BMO recently, and I was shocked how short the list is. Like, it is really short, right? I mean, it's like looking for silver company short, right? It's going to take way more. And it's not just a question of copper price. It's the how strong are the equity markets, right? So don't compute that's where the access to capital. If there's access to capital and the equity markets still haven't really responded, you look at the COP-J or look at the COP-X over the last year to date, they're up, 10% or something. It might be a little higher. It might be exaggerated, but they really haven't responded to incentivize people to start a junior copper exploration company, right? And then you say, okay, the next part, what's the chances of even finding these? Now, the status quo is to get anybody interested, you need a 1 billion ton deposit, 1 billion tons, right? There's very few of those that are near surface, extremely few that are not already in the hands of a major. There's just not that many of them, but that's the size that you need to actually put a dent into the balance sheet of the majors, right? That's kind of like the first checkbox, and they want bigger, right? Because they don't want to run a 20-year mine; they want a 40 to 60-year mine. And then you look, well, those are really big, so that you probably can find them somewhat easily. I'm probably oversimplifying the problem that geologists have at near surface. And then you say, where do they produce? They produce in these subduction zones to kind of know where they are. They run in the Andes. We know where they are in the United States. They're through Canada. There's some in Eastern Europe. And then you go, why haven't there been any big discoveries in Chile that produces currently 30% of the world's copper? Because it's been found, right? The big ones have been found near surface. So you think about the areas on the planet. And this was really Mark Gibson, who is one of our directors and worked for Friedland for 15 years as kind of his chief geophysicist. He goes, there's very few places on the planet that have the jurisdiction, that have the endowment that we haven't already looked. And Colombia is one, and maybe and I'm always get these backwards, Kazakhstan, one of the stands begins with K. I can't remember which one, right? There's some active exploration there that just have not, for whatever reason, and we kind of know the reasons why nobody was actually out there kind of exploring. So I have very low hopes that we're going to make some huge discovery that's going to be near surface. So that means deeper. And what does deeper mean? Deeper means much longer timelines to develop. You look at the project in Poland, I think to get the shaft down is 9 years. Look at Resolution in the United States. I think it takes 10 years once you start construction to see the first pound of copper come out of it. And that is just this construction period. So you're adding from the discovery, permitting, and now you have these extremely long construction timelines. And so, yeah, that's sort of like putting a square peg through a round hole. It's not going to fit. There's no way it's going to fit. Even if, when this AI bubble pops, right? The equity market might pop, but the transcendental necessity of nations and companies to be first and foremost in the AI race will not stop, right? So, and we just don't have enough of it. So even if you play it down a little bit, or it slows down a little bit, you're not going to avoid the problem. The problem is going to be a train wreck, and I think that nations are waking up to this without a doubt.
Another thread I wanted to pull on was your mention about the aging infrastructure when it comes to the electricity grid in the United States. I mean, as we sit here today, I believe it looks like tens of thousands of residents in Northwest Indiana are without power. It's been that way for nearly 2 weeks after a storm hit the area, which I cannot imagine. I don't know how much of that has to do with the way the grid is set up there, but there's also a lot of energy experts who have pointed out that there's a lot of risks right now when it comes to the grid in the United States due to this aging infrastructure, as you mentioned. What is it going to take to turn that around? How much copper is required to make that happen? And what's your overall view on the grid right now in the US and just how dire this problem is?
I'm going to try to explain it. Let's pretend we have a car, right? And for 25 years, we only needed to go 55 miles per hour, right? And the car, we bought it, and they said, don't worry, this thing can go 55 miles per hour for 15 years, right? And, we changed the tire, we changed the belt, we lost some compression on our cylinders. We use seal tight or whatever into our oil, and we just and now it's 25 years later. And so it's already 10 years past where it should have gone. And then the next thing I go, we've got to go 100 miles per hour. What do you do? Right? or that first little pothole you hit, which is, Indiana, you hit, and oh man, we lost a piston. Like, it becomes major problems because we've been putting patches on everything else, and now you need to go 100 miles per hour. So it's the compounding effect. We have a very old infrastructure, and don't quote me on those numbers, but I know it's somewhat close. That it's, like something designed for 15 years and we ran it for 25, or was designed for 30 and we ran it for 40. But it's way past its due date. The overall infrastructure. Now we're asking more of it. We're asking more for it. So it's not just the copper that goes into that data center, for example. It's, you now need to generate more power. We want to do that from clean energy, which requires even more copper. You have to distribute it, which requires more copper. So it's like a triple effect. You need to fix the old infrastructure. You need to grow the infrastructure. And on top of it, the end user, whether it's an electric vehicle or it's a data center, or it's whatever, is requiring more copper. Right. And so far, it's sort of like, I call it the wolf closest to the fire syndrome. You hear wolves everywhere, but you've got a certain amount of light around the fire, and you only grab the gun and you shoot the wolf closest to the fire. You're not worried about the pack of 20 that are coming that are still a kilometer away. You just shoot whatever's closest to the fire. And right now, even people don't even realize the problem because they're still putting out fires. They're like, we got a data center. Okay, we finally got the permit to build it. We build it. Okay, and we don't have enough powers. The citizens are complaining because their power rates, or we need to now put in more power. Now, they're just going down the line, right? And I think I've oversimplified how easy it is to solve the problem, which I believe creates the opportunity for us, right? Is we've been seeing it from the start of the production chain, where they're seeing the end of the production chain. So that somebody's sort of like, you're in your garden and you're like, what the hell happened to the water? And you start looking down the tube, right? And then finally, you take that knot out, you patch that hole there, and then finally you go back to the tube and you go, the problem is there's no water coming out of the faucet, right? And it's going to take time to go all the way back to the faucet to find the root cause. And in many of the minerals, the problem is not the deposits; the problem is getting them into production quicker than the demand. But in copper, there's no deposits. Like, it is, I saw a great graph by Freeland that showed, I think, aluminum, iron, and copper, and like the different properties it had. And the one thing that really stood out in copper is its scarcity, right? It's just not as common in the Earth's crust as a lot of other elements. But it's the third most used metal on the planet. And when you think about the new economy going from, where is it going? It's a digital world, right? Our economies are more and more every single day, they are digitally dependent, right? And that is where the growth is going to come from. And that growth requires copper, and it's very hard to replace, right? There's cheap substitutes that cause a lot of problems, like resistance and corrosion, or all sorts of stuff, and they're super less efficient. Or the other is silver, right? Which costs today, what is it, $75 an ounce? Or I think it's better than that right now, right? It's so even $6 copper a pound is nothing compared to $75 an ounce, right? So while there's going to be developments, production chains are built on old systems, it's not going to play out well.
Silver's knocking on the door of $70, but I'm guessing it's going to be $75 in short order. What if we so the bearish argument here is, well, the AI mania is a bubble anyways. These companies are trying to build out data centers, but they're not bringing in nearly enough profits to justify the cost. None of this makes sense. They're doing these weird circular financings where they're lending money to another company to then buy their chips, etc. We know all about some of this. You can't call it fraud directly, but it certainly looks shady. And let's say the data center build out stop. That whole thing grinds to a halt. We also have a global recession, which many people are calling for, which kills demand over at least in the immediate short term. In that scenario, is there any risk to the copper bear bull thesis, or is the supply side so constrained at this point that that will overwhelm everything in your view?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and I'm going to share my opinion. And my opinion is the hole is so big, it doesn't matter. But I'm also going to say that copper is going to be very resilient in that process. And let me explain why I have that thought process. First, I believe that AI is a bubble too. I do. The equity market is in a bubble. But if you look back at the internet race, right? You know, the .com bubble. What was the result of the .com bubble? Is you ended up with Google, Amazon, a bunch of new companies that survived it, and they were right. They were right that it was a land grab. It was about the number of users. You got Facebook, and also the survivors that came out of it are now multi-billion-dollar companies that survived through that process. Okay. But you could also argue they really didn't provide very much, right? They maybe saved us time. They made things more efficient. They introduced a whole new set of things that we didn't know we needed, like social media, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Now, all those companies knew that history. And now you look at AI, and AI one day, and some I can't wait to see all the different posts on your comments saying I'm crazy. There's not showing any productivity or any of these kind of things, but it is transcendental, right? Whoever has the best and fastest computer is going to win, right? With one major difference is it is going to be the backbone of the future economy, without a doubt. There is no doubt in my mind, right? It will be the future of how you actually expand and grow. Okay. And based on that, these guys have the treasure chests. They've already built the treasure chests. Even if the market collapses, they already have the money. On top of it, you have even dumber money, which is government money going, we need this. And why do they need this? Let's also go through the scenario where the world collapses and we go in, not collapses, that's probably extreme because then we should be buying shotguns and bulletproof vests and stuff. But you know what I'm saying? When it goes into a world recession, everything starts slowing down. Why? Because we're got all this debt. It's sitting on top of us. We can't get out of the way of it. What is the only way that you can really get out of it, right? It's through inflation and growth. And what is the only real lever that you have to grow? It's through more digitalization, going even faster into a digital world, having the fastest computer that can figure out how to solve all these problems and make us grow faster. Right? It's same as the impact of robotics that we had in productivity in the United States in factories, right? They're going to need to push the pedal to the metal to get out of that problem. And they're going to be willing to spend on it, right? They're going to, even if they have to spend more money, they're going to hopefully spend it on the solution, right? It's only going to push. The only way you can do it is you've got to grow faster than your debt load is growing. And the only way they have really to grow is through embracing, the digitalization of the world's economies. So in that case, which still requires copper, right? I don't see a scenario where even if it's, there's some sort of short-term correction, it's only going to make the problem worse, right? Because we need more investment. We need a higher copper price to incentivize more exploration and more development because these projects take so long. So if you're making decisions and you're being impacted by 6-month decisions, the 20-year impact is going to get worse, right? It's going to take 20 years to solve this problem. Right, it's going to take at least that amount of time. Whether it's a total train wreck or it's kind of like that race of those guys who run down the hill chasing the cheese, where they're just kind of like falling and stumbling and moving and hoping that you break as minimum amount of bones as possible. It's still going to be a race down that hill. It's without a doubt in my head, right? Because the end part of the part I know, the deposits aren't there, and we're not going to find them. Right. We're definitely not going to find ones that are near surface enough scale to make a big enough impact. I think we will continue and hopefully find deeper ones. But those obviously just make the problem longer to solve.
Well, talk to us about how Copper Giant fits into this whole scenario. There's a lot of exciting news that's been coming out of the company since we last talked. You've had a strategic financing led by Denarius Metals. You've got a long-term offtake agreement with Trafigura. You've got a drill results that came out of Mocoa at the end of last month, a PEA anticipated. Why don't you walk us through what has you most excited at Copper Giant and your plans to help address this shortfall that we've been talking about?
I'm not going to address it. That's a joke, right? But I'm going to take advantage of it, right? And that's the whole thought process behind it. And one of my most wonderful victories of all time was taking a precious metal gold lover of Frank Justra and turning him into saying, well, they're like brothers. You love them both, right? For different reasons, right? You can't, they're like children, right? So he is now extremely bullish on copper. And that started that he also got it. He goes, wait a second, the world needs a lot more copper. We need really big stuff. Looking around, haven't really found anything. Anyone who could find one of these that is near surface is going to be in a perfect position. Believed in it early, got behind it, became the biggest shareholder of it. And I think that's now playing out. We said we need to find a really big deposit that was overlooked because people probably thought it was drilled out in one of the few jurisdictions that hasn't been explored heavily for copper because Colombia has been dealing with its own internal problems over the last 20 years, and it's transformed itself beautifully over that time period. It's now ready with this new president that started at the beginning of this month in August. It says this is our potential. This is our time now. And we also said, well, myself, Ernie Mass, Mark Gibson, we've actually seen these things get built. So we started putting in a lot of the groundwork very early, working very closely with the community, getting them a part of the process, making them, it's their project too, building that trust, working on a national reputation, even as an exploration company, doing a lot of the things that people wait normally till you're at a construction decision to do because our goal was we want to build a mine. So last November, we came out with our resource. We passed that billion tons. It's still open in all directions. It's still the first deposit around it. And these porphyries have a tendency to be clusters. And we really haven't tested out some of these additional targets that we have around the project. And we're still only working around 6,000 hectares, and we have 130,000 hectares that we're still, looking to explore. But we said, based on the experience of how Cobre Panama got built, and definitely how Mirador got built, these happen in political windows, right? These happen when there is need joins opportunity, where it's happening right now, right? Where you had it in Ecuador, the oil prices went down. You had a president who goes, man, I'm loaded with debt. I got to pay. I wanted all these social programs. And Mirador and Fruta del Norte got built, or very similar in Panama. We need to continue to grow. What the heck are we going to do? There was the political will, and it got built. So we knew that in July, there'd be elections and we would have a new president in Colombia. We wanted to be ready for that. We wanted to then be ready to hit the pedal to the metal. And we got the best news possible. We have a extremely pro-mining president who is not just rhetoric. He has come out of the door in the first, less than 20 days, like 15 days of his administration. He's put in amazing ministers. He's put presidents into the best in the agencies that are about executing. You're already seeing things getting done on the ground. Great news. If anybody hasn't been paying attention, they should be looking at already the things that are getting done that are pushing mining forward. We're getting all sort of meeting requests to come in and speak. What do you need to do? What do we need to like already looking at how we can get things to move faster. And obviously to move things faster, you need the ability to spend, right? So we did a big $31 million financing on our normal spend. Today, I just looked, I think we're sitting at $47 million in the bank right now. That is like 2 years of our normal runway, but it gives us the ability to say, go, right? We need all, and we cannot, we're now a critical path company, right? We focus on what's the critical path and hammer away on the critical path. On top of it, we had Trafigura come in, which was huge, right? For Trafigura to come in on an offtake agreement on a project that doesn't even have a PEA. What is it telling you? I think the second largest metals trader in the world going, we think that Colombia is going to be a place that's going to explode because it has infrastructure, it's close to the United States, it's got the endowment, it's underexplored. This is a place we want to get a foothold in here, right? But number two, where else are we going to get new supply from? What are we going to do, right? So they came in early, which I think also helped to bring a lot of eyeballs to say, if Trafigura thinks it, maybe they're right. Or maybe one plus one plus one is three, and they're like, "What am I doing wrong? Why is their market cap so low still? What am I doing?" Nope, Trafigura just came in. I knew I was right. Right, it really turned, and I really appreciate our existing shareholders. But I always see their comments. They've been believers for a long time, and so for them too, just like me, it's like finally it's being recognized. So we have everything that we need to actually take a project that's going to be finishing a PEA before the end of the year and probably put it to the front of the pack on what actually can produce new copper in a near term, right? That will make a massive difference because we have this window. And I think people will start seeing and believing and understanding we have the experience, two, you have the political will, but the advantage of a near surface deposit with a high grade core and infrastructure in place makes this doable in a very short period of time. Right? A relative short period of time. And so I think that is, that we're getting more and more believers.
And yeah, you mentioned that it's starting to become more recognized. So the question becomes, when we look at the COPX ETF, it's up around 30% this year versus 16% for copper itself. So a nice little outperformance there. But for Copper Giant, you're up 135% year to date. The stock has gone ballistic recently. So I have to pose the question, after such a tremendous run, is Copper Giant's valuation perhaps getting a little stretched here? Or do you still think this is a good entry point in the company?
I am obviously extremely excited. Not about what we've already done, which I'm very proud of, right? It's sort of, and it was actually a relief. It's like, okay, I wasn't crazy. This is, it made sense, right? Like, it was pretty simple, the thesis, but it's actually playing out, right? But then you look, the reason I'm so excited is the value proposition that I have now between I have the money to do it, right? But two is, how much do I need to spend to create huge amount of value through a process that is just de-risking? And the greatest one is a perceived risk, which was previously our valuation is Colombia itself. And being able to, this president, I strongly believe, is going to continue to demonstrate to market that Colombia is the place that you want to invest. Right. I've believed in it a while, and we've been able to accomplish things over the last 2 years that people go, "What? When you were in Colombia, how did you do all that stuff?" Right. How were you able to drill all this time? How were you able to get to these agreements with the community and the First Nations and continue to grow? What? Because it's a really good place to work, right? And now we have the market is going to be correcting at the same time that as you go from a PEA to getting towards a construction decision, your value is a PNAV. It's your price versus your NPV, and that starts to close, right? And now imagine where I can say I can do that in 3 years. Those are big jumps in your valuation on a little spend. So I would say it's pretty simple. Look at us compared to every other billion-ton near-surface porphyry. You can even compare us to the ones that are deep underground, and look at our valuation per pound in the ground, or when our PEA comes out, our price versus our NPV, and say, do you think we're properly valued today, or we still have a long ways to go, right? And I really think it's just the tip of the iceberg. We're at our market cap today, we are nowhere close to where we should be and our potential of where we're going to be.
Well,
So
I'm going to put
my short answer, you're not too late. Like, and even I'm just arguing in the copper space, don't worry, we got at least 20 years to really become an expert on this stuff, because this is going to play out over an extremely long period of time.
Well, Ian, fantastic conversation. I'm going to put links below to the Copper Giant website as well as social media for people who want to follow along with the company. As always, fantastic conversation. Thank you for shedding so much light on the copper sector and Copper Giant as well.
I love, well, let's just talk one day just about copper. I have no problem, right? I really enjoy watching it play out. And then I think, honestly, so many eyeballs are on the trade side that are looking more short term, and there's very few. Maybe Robert Freeland is definitely one of them, but there's few others really talking about this other side of things, which I really is such a huge opportunity.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.